Okay, now we're going to talk about Chapter 10. Chapter 10, please do not review this video until you've already looked at the video that's describing why we do seals and packing, and I use pumps as the example for that. Seals and packing are used in a variety of objects, most commonly pumps, but also valves, also gearboxes, and a variety of other equipment where you've got an enclosure around some sort of liquid that needs to not leak when you've got a drive shaft or a some sort of mechanical change that needs to be applied into that enclosure or liquid. So the book talks about a couple different kinds of packing, and it dives right into the oldest kind of packing out there. This is packing made from materials that used to be wool, like wool and leather and stuff that has an origin in terms of design that could be 100 or maybe 150 years old. We're really going back to the 19th century for a lot of this stuff. But the fun part about it is it still is in use today. We're going to find packing like this in many pumps, in many plants today. Even if they're 50-year-old pumps, they're still using packing and they're still operating because they don't break easily. If everyone could make sure their mic is off, I'd appreciate it. So the important thing about packing is that you know how to follow directions carefully. Many of these packing systems are going to have well-documented procedures for replacing that packing, replacing that seal between a shaft and a housing. And the only thing I'm going to expect you guys to learn from this course is a basic understanding of what these terms are. So when they start throwing out terms like a gland or packing ring or compression packing, you kind of know what you're talking about. Now, what I have done is I've also provided you a couple videos where, number one, I showed you a video where we talk about replacing a mechanical seal, and that's the more modern kind of packing. And then number two, I showed you a video that talks about the original packing, which is these braided fiber packing that can go in there, which is really the old school. So the first part of this chapter, in chapter 10, talks about the different kinds of packing material out there. And it's not important to remember which is which. There are a variety of different kind of packing material: twisted fiber, square braided, it's over, et cetera, braid over braid. You just need to follow the procedures that are recommended by the manufacturer for replacing the packing in the pump or the valve of your choice. So the book talks about these different types. They're interesting to learn about, but the important part for you is you have to understand that they are a fibrous material based on very old school wool packing from the 19th century. We've just got some modern fibers involved now in our modern systems. Inside the actual packing, you've got several names you need to know. When you've got a bunch of these layers of fibrous packing in a circle, you got a row of these in like 3 or 4 of them in a row, that whole assembly inside the housing is called a stuffing box. And so that seal is called a stuffing box seal to kind of clamp it all together. And you've got a chamber where you've got these rings stacked up, and they're called packing rings. And then to enclose that chamber, you've got something called a gland, which is really nothing more than that big ring that clamps down and clamps all your packing material together. The tighter you make your gland, the tighter the packing is, and the less it'll leak. But for many of these old school packing, you want it to leak a little bit. So if you over tighten that stuffing box, then you won't get any leak and your stuffing box will heat up and burn out. So you want just a little bit of a leak, and that stuffing gland lets you tighten that entire box down on all your packing material. There's a few other key terms like a lantern ring, which are the rings that separate the layers of the different packing in there. And the book talks about how you install the packing. For instance, it mentions that when you cut this fibrous material and then wrap it around your stuffing box or the shaft in your stuffing box, you need to cut it properly so you don't just cut the end square, because you're making basically a cylinder with it. So you have to cut it with a little bit of an angle on the end so it makes a nice tight seal and doesn't leak. The book takes you through a whole procedure. You will need to answer a couple questions about the procedure in the quiz, but I have to say honestly, you will need to follow the procedure that you're given for the pump that you're told to change the packing on. You must follow the procedure required by your business and or by the pump manufacturer. Don't go by the generic procedure here in the book. I'm going to skip over to section 10-2. Modern pumps almost always have mechanical seals. Now, this doesn't mean that all pumps that are produced today have mechanical seals. There are still big pumps out there with old school packing that are currently sold, but most mid-sized to small modern pumps have mechanical seals. These are assemblies that you can buy, and when they wear out, you just pop them out, pop them back in, and tension them properly, and they work well. You don't need to worry about these old school braided material wrapping around your packing chamber. So the book takes you through a few different styles of mechanical seals. And it's good to recognize some of these terms, like what is a mating ring, right? What is an inside seal versus an outside seal? And they've given you lovely examples of what these drawings are looking like and where the seal is compared to the rotating shaft versus the chamber where you've got your pressure or your liquid you want to contain. Many, many pumps have double seals. The last thing I'll talk about in the book is chapter 10-3, which is the oil seals. They call it a radial lip seal. I have generally never heard it called that out in the industry. I've always heard it called an oil seal. And this talks about how that radial lip seal works. These are generally used in low pressure systems like that pump I was talking about, very high pressure. But if you're talking about a gearbox, probably not high pressure, right? You've got a gearbox with some grease in it or some oil in it, and that oil really isn't being pushed or pumped anywhere. It just needs to stay in that gearbox, so it's not high pressure, or a bearing. So you've got a variety of oil seals on those devices that just need to contain the liquid inside. They don't need to keep a pressure, kind of a pressure seal. And a couple of things that it mentions in here, which I will mention here. It does have a few little fun facts that are useful, talking about smacking oil seals into place and the techniques for doing that. Like if you beat on a bearing with a hammer, you probably will ruin that bearing's oil seal. If you beat on oil seals with a hammer incorrectly, you're probably going to ruin it. And they just talk about different techniques for installing these. So there's some useful little fun facts in here. And that's all I'm going to do in talking about chapter 10.